All right, in part 3 of LeChatelier's Principal Lab, what I have made here is a solution containing iron 3 and the thiocyanate ion, okay? SCN-1 and iron 3, so iron 3 thiocyanate, which creates a reddish-brown solution into water, which we can see here. Now, the first test tube, right here on the left, this is going to be our reference test tube throughout the experiment. We're going to cross-reference back to that one to see, as I stress these other 3 systems. In part 3, we have 3 stresses, and we're going to see what happens to this as we do these different stresses and compare it back to the original. In stress number 1, I'm going to add some solid potassium thiocyanate. And solid potassium thiocyanate is this white compound. It's got potassium ions, which are inert. They're not going to do anything here, but it's the addition of the thiocyanate into it. So when this dissolves, we are going to increase the concentration of thiocyanate into this test tube. So I'm going to enter it in there, and very quickly you can see what happens there with this chemical reaction and the stress. So you're going to want to make note of that into your data table, and then look through as to why the reaction is shifting either left or right, going towards more reactants or more products based on the stress of the system that was added. Stress number 2, we are going to add additional iron 3 ions. Okay, the iron 3 is going to be in solution form. We're going to add additional iron 3, and this is going to go into test tube 3. Okay. So there again, you can see when you cross-reference back to test tube number 1 on the left, you can see what happens when additional iron is added to this reaction. Okay. Last stress is I'm going to add sodium hydrogen phosphate. Now, phosphate ions, currently, again, it's a white powder, but this is phosphate. When the phosphate dissolves in water, okay, it will bind up the iron ions that are present in the solution, and we'll see what happens when we are, in essence, this chemical compound will pull iron ions out of the solution. So there is stress number 4. So I'll grab my stir rod, and you can see now with test tube, when I compare the original to what it is now after adding the sodium hydrogen phosphate, we can see what happens when we add additional iron ions to the standard solution, the reference test tube, and thiocyanate ions to the original test tube. So mark those observations down in the data table. And then the key thing in all of these is be able to provide a good, solid explanation, something that you could use in the national exam or the test in this unit to be able to get full credit for why these observations are occurring then when I cause these different stresses.